So for this video, we're going to look at the superior and proximal portion of the arm or the pectoral girdle. The two bones we're going to focus on are the scapula and the humerus. And in this view right here, we have a third bone right here, which is called the clavicle. Clavicle has two parts here, which is called the acromial end, and the other end is medial. It's called the sternal end. Going on to the the scapula. We have an anterior view of the scapula, and this broad surface right here is called the subscapular fossa. That subscapular fossa is medial to the medial border. It's lateral to the medial border. Going lateral from the subscapular fossa, you see this large area right here as a point of articulation with the humerus called the glenoid cavity. There's 2 points that the scapula have. This part right here is called the acromion process, and that articulates with the clavicle. So the acromion process is superior and lateral. The coracoid process is this part right here, and that's anterior. Now, if we look at a posterior view of the scapula, you see there's this major ridge right here called the spine of the scapula. That spine of the scapula is continuous with the acromion process. And it's at that point that the scapula is divided into two areas. There's a superior area that's relatively small, and that's called the supraspinous fossa. And there's a much broader area that's inferior to that. It's called the infraspinous process. Infraspinous fossa. Continuing on to the humerus. The humerus has this proximal area right here where the point of articulation with both the clavicle and the scapula. This is called the head of the humerus. Adjacent to the head of the humerus, we have a neck, and then there's two bumps here. There's a relatively small bump and a larger bump. That smaller bump is medial. That smaller bump is the lesser tubercle. The larger bump is the greater tubercle. That little valley in between is called the intertubercular groove. So there's a groove in between. This bump right here, midway down the shaft of the humerus, is called the deltoid tuberosity. So this is an anterior view of the humerus. Down here at the distal end, we have the medial epicondyle, and this is medial because it lines up with the head of the humerus. So the head of the humerus is medial, and the condyle with which the epicondyle with which it aligns itself is also medial. So this is where if you hit your arm, you'll feel funny. That we'll call the funny bone. That's the lateral epicondyle right there. And one last structure to look at. From a posterior view, this major fossa is called the olecranon